Hello, solopreneurs. Do you remember the Princess Diaries? Anne Hathaway is a nerdy high school student who just learned she's a princess. And it's a fun romp if you like young teenage girl movies. But one of the things that stood out to me as I was watching this movie applies to us as solopreneurs. And that is this thing that she just shouts out at one point, I'm invisible and I'm good at it. So many times we as children, we are raised to fit in. And when we don't do that, what? We get in trouble. We're made fun of. We're put back in our place. But here's the problem. Having learned that, we start our own business and we're trying to get clients. And guess what? We are just fitting in. We're not standing out. We're not making it possible for people to find us and say, yes, that's the person I want to work for me. Today, we are talking about why you've got to retrain yourself to stand out. Welcome to the Solopreneur Life Podcast. I am your host, Kathryn Aragon. At Solopreneur Life, our mission is to help solopreneurs and freelancers launch and grow a six-figure business without overwhelm or burnout. So you can learn the skills, habits, and mindsets that you need to build a business that's not only profitable, it's fun. Today, we are talking about how to stand out in a crowded marketplace. But before we dive in, take a minute now to subscribe to the Solopreneur Life Podcast so you don't miss a single episode. So what we're going to start with today is essentially diving into why you need to stand out. Why can't you come in and be this meek and kind of private business? Because I think many times we like that idea. We've started our own business. We want to run it on our terms. We don't want to be big and bombastic and take over the world. I mean, sometimes we do, but not always, right? So why is it so important that you make sure you look different from everybody else? Well, it boils down to differentiation. And this is a key to successful marketing. Believe it or not, no matter what your business is, you are a marketer because you have to market your own business, your own skills, your own offers so people know to buy from you. You see, here's where it all boils down. You start your own business, right? And you are about to go and start proposing your services. You're going to go pitch different companies and say, hey, you should hire me. Well, here's the thing. Almost every business you're going to start, in almost any industry you're going to focus on, you will not be the only person there. You are going to have hundreds, if not thousands, of competitors, all vying for those same clients. So especially a really good client, let's say a lot of copywriters go for Agora. At Agora, there was a day when they didn't have enough copywriters, but today, you've got to be well established. You've got to stand out. They need to see examples of things you've done, and they want to see the results before they'll even consider hiring you. If you don't stand out, if you aren't one of the best, they won't even consider you. And I'm pretty good, and they still didn't want me because I didn't have exactly the right examples. So this is it doesn't matter how experienced you are. So this isn't even a matter of you're a seasoned pro versus a newbie. This is true for all of us. You have to differentiate. Now, why is that? Well, again, you and your competitors are all delivering the same product. The features and benefits are probably identical, in all honesty. I mean, if you're writing an article, what are you offering? I'm offering well-written articles. I'm offering SEO optimization. I'm offering to deliver it on time. I'm offering to make sure it's so well edited you hardly have to do any edits on your own. All of us could say those same things, couldn't we? So how do you make sure you stand out? Well, you have to be different. You're not going to get hired based on how you blend in. You're going to get hired based on those elements that make you different. So what are those things? That's what we need to figure out. So let's just back up a little bit. This is the why you do have to stand out. But how do you do that? Well, I've got 6 ideas that'll get you started. And, this is just a starting point because in all honesty, the industry is going to change. Different clients are going to want different things. And the more you do this, the more you're going to realize what are the things your clients love about you, and you can lean into those things and turn them into real differentiators. But to start out, you just need to start with something. So let's start with number 1, knowing yourself. What makes you different or better or the right choice? How can you position yourself in a way where you truly are the standout option? That's a really good question, and it kind of starts with you understanding who you are. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? You don't want to try to hide your weaknesses. You just don't want to lean into them. So what are your strengths? What are the things that you can sell yourself as? If you never miss a deadline, if you never misspell a word, those are strengths. If you specialize in a particular industry or you've had certain experience that other people don't have, those are things to lean into. A lot of it is, again, it's just knowing yourself, knowing how you come to the table, what you bring to the table, and how you take care of your clients. Some of this is personality driven, some of it is experience, some of it is skills, but you need to start here. What makes you, yourself, just as an entity, different? The second step is to show up. If they don't know you exist, they won't call on you. Bottom line, you have to be top of mind. That's one of the reasons I developed the ARC method of marketing: attention, relationship, conversion, because those 3 steps matter. And especially right now, if you're trying to stand out, we need to lean into attention and relationship, because that's going to be how you stand out. Now, all of this is largely done today via social media. But you can also use email. You can also go to events and actually meet with people, build social media. Maybe you write a book and that helps you stand out and get attention. Maybe you're a speaker, or as I do here, you've got a podcast or a YouTube channel, and those things help you stand out. People get to see what you're talking about, and that lends credibility. So when they're looking for someone who truly understands what they need, and they've seen you talk about it and provide solutions, they're like, okay, I think I can trust them. I want them to write for me. I've done this actually since the first month I opened my business. I started my blog first thing, and I would write, at first I think I was writing 3 articles a week, and I shared them all on social media. Some of my first jobs came from that process. They found me on Twitter, and they called me up and said, I want you to write for me. Because they'd seen what I had done. All of this becomes your portfolio, but it starts with you showing up. You have to put yourself out there. You can't hide away in your little cave and expect people to know who you are and what you do. So, know yourself, show up, and then be real. This is number 3, and this is a really big one because this goes back to what we're talking about. You can't be invisible. You should never copy another professional. Well, I did this, and I think we all do. We pick someone who's successful in the industry. Maybe they've given a lot of tips, and we think, I'm just going to do everything they do. Well, that's a good way to get your feet on the ground, but it's not a good way to stand out because there are hundreds of other people doing the same thing. And if all of you show up, sending out this, I'm a Bob Bly alternative. Well, first of all, Bob Bly is still out there, and they're going to go to the original, not to the copy. But second of all, you're just another copycat. You don't succeed with a copycat business. Now, we sometimes like to hide behind these facades. It's really easy to create this social media persona. and then we hide behind it, or copy some other professional and we hide behind that. The real us is somewhere in the background, and our clients don't discover the real us until they actually start working with us. And sometimes it's a surprise and it's jarring and they don't like it. So while you're showing up, you need to show up as you. Don't create a copycat business. It will not help you. That's not how you're going to stand out. People buy from the provider, the company, the person who they know, like, and trust. So you have to show up as you. I talk a lot about this as there are a couple of different ways you can do this, because you always want to create value posts in social media, but you also need to go ahead and let yourself shine through. It's okay to produce personality posts. And these are just you doing things in your own life, sharing bits and pieces of who you really are. I think I have a post of myself drinking Coca-Cola because it was like the first Coke I'd had in a couple of years, and I had forgotten how delicious it was. And so I took a picture of it and shared it in Facebook, and it got a ton of engagement. Actually, it's funny. There was one person he believes sugar is a food group, and he was the first person to respond to that post and tell me, whoo, yes, and finally you're drinking Coke again. And so, yes, don't be afraid to share those bits of your real personality. Be real. And that leads me to number 4, which is be human. Sounds like the same thing, but it kind of is not. And here's why. So many times, I talked about this facade we like to put on when we're representing our business. We're trying to be ever so professional, and we come off as a robot. We come off as a corporate voice rather than a human voice. And that's not going to win you the deal. People want to work with you, with a person. They are behind the scenes. They're going to have to talk to you, and they want to enjoy the experience. So they need to see you as a human who has conversations, who they know, like, and trust, who they trust to show up as you did in social media. Don't be afraid to be the real you, but also don't be afraid to be human. And what that means is, this leads me to number 5, you are flawed. Let's just face it, you are not perfect. Neither am I. Neither is Jonathan, who's running sound for me. Nobody who's listening to this video or podcast is perfect. We are all flawed, aren't we? And that's okay. You know why? Because we're human. And that means that you're going to actually bring some quirks to the table. This takes me back. I'm going to tell you kind of an intimate story on myself, okay? 1 year after I started my business, I had a spinal cord injury that left me, I was in the hospital for a week. I was told I'd never walk again. And when I finally got home, I discovered that I couldn't actually get out of bed without losing what tiny bit of functionality I had left in my legs. So I figured, I may not understand physiologically what's going on, but I got to stay in bed. Well, not just laying in bed, I was flat on my back for 4 years. I couldn't go to events. I couldn't even put makeup on because I couldn't move well enough. I couldn't stand in front of a mirror. And because I have shaky hands, which is yet another foible that embarrasses me, putting on eye makeup, oh my goodness, that was not going to happen. So here I was. If you looked at me, if you saw me in a picture or a video, you would see an invalid, right? I did not want to show up weak in front of my audience. So I never took pictures of myself. I never got on a video. Well, unfortunately, this was before video marketing became a big thing. But if you look back at some of my earliest YouTube videos, you may see that I was in my bedroom. You may see the slats of my bed frame behind me propped up on pillows, because that was the best I could do at that time. And yes, it embarrassed me. Yes, I didn't want that weakness to show through. But you know what? Those kinds of quirks and flaws are not actually a weakness. They are a strength if you position them right. Think of John Morrow. John Morrow is in a wheelchair and the only thing he can move is his face. When I had been, I think I was just like 6 months flat on my back in bed, I ran across John Morrow. And when I read his story, I was elated because here was a guy who was worse than I was, I felt like, because at least I could move parts of my body. He was in a wheelchair, I was flat on my back, but both of us were dealing with something very similar. And if he could make it, I could make it. That was inspiring to me. So don't look at those quirks, those things that you're embarrassed of, as a weakness. They are differentiators if you use them properly. So again, just lean into who you really are. Don't try to hide who you really are. Another example, and this is something maybe a little bit more relatable. Tim Sulo, who is the head of marketing at Ahrefs, hired me years ago to do some video training for him. And one of the things I kind of figured out, I'm not putting him down in the least. This is me elevating him, actually, because he's a great example of someone who maybe was a little self-conscious about his accent. Coming from the Ukraine, he does have a distinctive accent, but is that something that we can't get over? Not at all. And it just took him a little while of realizing that nobody cared before he was willing to start putting himself on more of the videos. Prior to that time, he was looking for somebody else to say the things he wanted to say. Again, lean into those differences. If you have an accent, if you have a handicap, if you have a tick on your face, don't let it worry you, because that's the real you. And ultimately, when you work with your clients, they're going to see the real you. So they may as well see it up front. Let them know what they're going to get. Let them know who they're going to work with, flaws and all, because that's who you are. You can't hide that. Okay, that was number 5, was be flawed. Number 6 is focus on a specific industry, problem, solution, or service. You've got to specialize. If you want to stand out, you have got to be a specialist in something. And I'm going to use writers as an example here, because this is what made this particular point just stand out to me. Back when I was running the Crazy Egg blog, I would have writers and business owners and experts, all of them writing articles for me. And they would all of them send me an email pitching their idea, and I would say yay or nay. Ultimately, they would send me an article. The people who were writers first and not a subject matter expert never nailed the article. They couldn't. Because what were they doing? In order to write that article, they were having to go out and see what other people wrote, copy it, and write their own article from those copied bits. They were having to assemble an article, not write one from scratch. That's when I understood the difference that a subject matter expert could make. Because somebody who was in the trenches doing the job and not copying other people could give me details that I didn't know, because I was the editor, I was the manager of this blog. I wasn't the person, I actually wasn't a subject matter expert. I trusted my writers to do that for me. Well, you as an expert coming to your clients, it doesn't matter what business you're in, whether you're a writer, a developer, an artist, whatever it is you do. You've got to be a subject matter expert. When I'm in a conversation with a new client, and we're talking about content marketing, because that's my specialty, when I know so much about content marketing that I guide that conversation and I answer questions before they ever ask them, that shows off my expertise. That shows that I know what I'm doing. If I'm just sitting there waiting, kind of ready to take orders. And remember, we talked about this last week. You are not an order taker. Instead, you are someone who brings expertise. You've got to step into that expertise. You've got to be a subject matter expert, a industry expert, a problem solver. And you've got to bring all that to the table. That's going to make you stand out, because where other people are just talking about, I'm going to give you an article on time, you're going to say, well, wait a minute, have you thought about this challenge? Because I don't know if we can really use this term to talk about this. It's not going to fly with the people who you're trying to target. Do you hear that? Do you hear how much more expert I sound? Because I bring my specialty to the table. So what are we talking about? Okay, 6 tips for standing out. You start by knowing yourself. That means your strengths as well as your weaknesses. You show up, you be real, be human, be flawed, and finally, specialize. Once you do that, you will begin to stand out. But I hear you. I hear what you're saying underneath the surface. Even if you're nodding your head, yes, I need to do that. Inside you're going, I don't want to do that. I know, because I've struggled with this too. So why is it so hard to stand out? We already talked a little bit about this with the I'm invisible and I'm good at it. There's a piece of us that likes playing it safe. There are very few of us who are comfortable throwing ourselves off a cliff and trusting that we can build wings on the way down. But that's what we have to do. You've seen pictures of, like the umbrellas. It's all white umbrellas and one red umbrella, or all bland Crayolas and one bright colored red Crayola. That's what we've got to do. Everybody else is plain Jane vanilla. We've got to stand out, and that's scary. Because we spent so many years told that we have to fit in, that we have to follow the rules, that we have to do what so-and-so is doing. Why can't you be like so-and-so? Well, I'm not like so-and-so. Well, you shouldn't be like so-and-so, right? You have got to be the original, the only, the most unique thing on the planet, because you're selling your differences, not your similarities. The challenge is that it feels weird. It feels unsafe to be so different. But I promise you, if you are the first person to say something or do something or to position yourself in a certain way, now you're the first, you're the original, and everyone's copying you. The deal is you have to have the courage to be a leader. It is scary not to follow the leader. When I started my business, actually, I'll tell you how I got started. It was one of Bob Bly's books, and that's why I speak about him quite often. I was still trying to be a fiction writer, and I finally read one of his books, and in the first couple of paragraphs, he explained why you shouldn't try to be a fiction writer, why a copywriter was the better way to go. And I was like, okay, fine, I give in, I'll do it. I will study copywriting and I will do this thing, because I was sick of not being regarded as a writer. And if copywriting was how I could make money as a writer, then that's what I would do. It took, I'm a slow learner sometimes, but in his books, and if you're trying to start your business, especially a copywriting business, go buy Bob Bly's books. You will thank me later. But one of them is basically his tools and templates for how he creates his own information packs and things like that. It's very, very good stuff. And so I was channeling Bob Bly when I got started. But little by little, it was just like one tweak at a time, I started realizing, I could say this about myself that's unique. I could do this that's unique. And within a couple of years, I had someone contact me and he said, nobody else's website looks like yours. That was a compliment. Everybody else had the identical kind of website saying the identical kinds of things about themselves. And I had something that was finally original. And it made me stand out and I got the job. Leaders lead, they don't follow. And you need to be a leader. People want to hire the leader. So get comfortable with feeling slightly uncomfortable. You're going to feel that way, I promise you. It is scary. You're writing something on your website and you're thinking, how's this going to go over? Or like I talk with you and I tell you some very personal stories like I just did in this podcast. And I think, oh no, am I getting too personal? Am I sharing too much information? And don't worry about that, because people want to know the real you. And this is part of my story. This, me building my business from bed, that's part of what makes me the leader. That's part of what makes me unique. It gives me a perspective that other people don't have. And it kind of shows my work ethic that I didn't give up and quit. I will push through anything. So what's your story? You can undo and you can change gears at any point, but you've got to start experimenting with, how can I put something unique on my website? Try it. Put a different message, put a different call to action, put a different offer on your website. And at any point, 2-3 months in, and you're like, that's not really working. I don't like that. You can change it. Don't be afraid to test new ideas. Don't be afraid to be the first to try something. I've worked with so many people who they're all about best practices. But honestly, best practices do not serve you. Because a best practice was best for another company. It doesn't mean it's going to be best for you. Best practices are things that everybody around the entire world are all doing, which means you will just blend in. You will become invisible, and you will be good at it. Let's not do that. Let's make you visible. Let's bring you out into the front of the crowd where your clients can see you and realize, oh, okay, there's something here. I want to work with you. That's all you got to do. Make yourself visible. Put yourself out there. Try something new and become the leader who you probably are deep down inside. It'll take time to get comfortable with it, but you got this. I know you do. We are so afraid of being different, but different is what stands out. So here's what I want you to do. And I want you to start from this moment. I want you to be you. Be boldly you. And don't let anybody make you feel like you're doing it wrong. Because how can you be wrong if you're you? You are never going to be wrong. Okay, Jonathan, do you have any questions for me?
Wow, there's so much good stuff that you addressed here. You talk about standing out, and one of the things that I think is interesting when you're dealing with the not copying, but standing out. We have to identify trends.
Yes.
So identifying a trend and then not falling prey to just mimicking the trend, but identifying why is that trend a trend.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a key, because obviously, whenever we experiment, we run the risk of failing.
Oh, yes. And that's why it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah. And so this is where I think it's so good to talk about this, because there's a real misconception that following the trend is the safe, secure thing to do. But
right.
It will actually backfire on you because you'll just blend in.
Let me correct the term you're using, because a trend is different from a best practice. And I use best practice with air quotes. So if you're following best practice, you are copying everybody else. You will take a course that some guru is teaching, and they're going to say, this is the best way to do this thing. This is how to do email marketing. You do this, then this, then this, then this. Here are the templates, here are the tools. Now go do it. And as soon as that happens, as soon as that training becomes popular, everyone around the globe is using the exact same template to do what you do. I used to get tickled, and Jonathan, you remember this. People would submit a guest post idea to me. They would pitch an idea, and they would use a template that I had written. And It was so obvious that they weren't just being themselves. They weren't being human as they reached out to me. They were just being a robot. Here's a template. I'm going to plug in the information. Sometimes they would leave the little blank that I left for them, and they wouldn't fill it in. So I would even see like the real template. That's for the birds. You will never stand out with a best practice.
And yet, though, to take something and improve upon it.
Yes.
You're not saying that you can't see what's working with best practice, and then customize it for you. But that's precisely
well,
what you're
many
saying.
times,
it has to have you in there, doesn't it?
Yes, and many times that best practice is built on a trend. A trend is, for instance, they built social media. Now everybody's on Facebook. Okay, that was a trend. What's a new trend? A new trend is a lot of people are leaving Facebook. So if that's the trend, are you going to go all in on building your business on Facebook? Probably not. It doesn't matter if a guru says this is a best practice, because you're seeing the trend and you can go, no, I think I need to do this instead. So you do, Jonathan, need to watch the trends, but you don't want to perfectly follow the best practices. I actually take courses. I buy courses a lot to learn what the tactic is that they're teaching, because that fills me in on what they believe is working, but I never just blanket take it. I take it and I adapt it. And that's, I think, what you're saying, Jonathan, is how do you use that best practice in your own business?
Well, and that goes to point one of what you know yourself. You have to know where your strengths are. I was just watching a clip of Michael McIntyre he's a hilarious comedian. Kathryn and I love watching his stand-up comedy. But he was in a talk show, and this was several years ago, and he had just hit it big, and he was going on this tour where he was having to sell out arenas, no longer small
stages. Yes.
He was having to filling up arenas. And he said, they asked him if it was different to have to be on a big stage. And he said, I discovered I'm actually better on a big stage.
Really?
And it gives him more room. And some of his comedy is very physical, the way he moves. And because he knew himself, he stepped into this and was able to differentiate. Instead of he said, I have to make all my expressions bigger. I have to play to the back of the room. And he was used to being in a small crowd where basically the front row was his audience. But because he knew what he was good at and he was able to step into that, he actually captured a whole new arena, a whole new stadium for a whole new stage.
Well, he probably took his whole business to another level because he was stepping into his strength.
Right.
So identifying those strengths and playing to them.
Whereas most stand-up comics will say that, no, the small, intimate room is the energy that I feed off of that. And he figured out that he could do something that other comedians don't excel at, which is playing to a large crowd.
He's the one who always is walking around the stage.
He's the British guy.
I tell you what, his walk is funny.
And he makes fun of it.
Yeah.
And he has more stage to do it now.
Right.
So he makes fun of the fact that he can use the whole stage to
That's so
make
funny.
fun of, to poke fun at himself. But this is where, again, he differentiated himself. And this is what you're saying. If he didn't know that he could handle that stage and set himself apart from the small room stand-up comedian that is more typical. And you think of the comedy, the comedy shops and you go to a comedy theater, you have dinner, and it's usually a very intimate room. So this is a good example of how someone can differentiate themselves. But so how do you maybe this is another podcast, because you had mentioned this the other day about wanting to do a podcast on this, is to know what you're good at, you have to put in the reps.
Yes, we will talk about that in another podcast. But I'm going to tell you a story. This was like 2 years ago, I think. I was at a conference and I saw Molly Mahoney for the first time. And I think I saw it recently. That was her first time on stage. I could be wrong, but that's what I think I heard. Molly Mahoney said something that stuck. It was like a dart through my forehead. It was that poignant. And she said what I've said to you. You've got to be yourself, but the best version of yourself. And I stopped cold. Because at that point, I was a successful business owner. I had worked with big name clients, but if you asked me what I was doing to stand out, what's the best version of myself, I didn't know the answer to that. And I made it my mission for the next entire year. I worked on, who am I? That first question that I gave you, I'm going to go back to it now. Know yourself. What makes you different, better, the right choice? I honestly hadn't figured that out yet. And this was just 2 years ago. And it's crazy to me. But it's a blind spot because the things that we feel like we're good at are the things we take most for granted.
Right.
And so we are
Comes easily to you.
Yes, so to us that's not valuable. And yet those are the things that people love about me, and I'm like, "Oh, don't look at that. That's not important. Look over here at this thing that's hard for me."
Yeah, because you feel proud of all the effort you exerted to hone that skill, and the things that come easily to you are where you can stand
Right. And so actually I was working on a worksheet on, what all these different qualities of myself. And Jonathan will tell you, I was sitting on the sofa while he was in the kitchen. I was like, "So Jonathan, tell me, what am I good at?" Because I couldn't answer those questions. That was so hard for me. And recently somebody gave me that worksheet again, and I filled it out in just a couple of minutes. It took so much effort, hard effort, to lean into this "who am I" question and find, really, really be confident filling out what I'm good at. We're all very good at naming what we're bad at, but it's hard to say what we're good at. And we need to throw that out the window. We have got to focus on what makes us extraordinary. What are your superpowers? What are your gifts?
Right.
That's what we need to know.
Right, and I don't know how much, I'm checking here how much time we have, but there was so much here that was so good. The other thing that you said that I really liked was the show up. Mm-hmm. You have to show up. Basically, and it goes back to the putting in the reps. It's kind of similar to that topic, but if you're not present, you're out of sight, out of mind.
Yes.
You have to be present. You have to show up. You have to bring your A game all the time. I've heard you say this oftentimes with writers that you've contracted, and it's clear that they got to the article last night.
Yes, or this morning.
And they got to it, and it's clear that it wasn't their A game. Now, who knows what was going on in their lives to put them in that spot where they had to scramble at the end. But if you don't bring your A game, if you don't show up, if you're not consistent, then people don't know what to expect. And I think that's part of what standing out is. I know every time I push this button, I get this result.
Yes.
It's kind of behavioral conditioning for your clients.
And we forget that we are training our audience. We are training not just our audience, our clients, to either trust us or not trust us.
Right.
You gotta get their trust. Otherwise, they won't keep hiring you. And that's the key to building a business. It's understanding, first of all, you're not just a freelancer. You are a business. That's why I use the term solopreneur. You have to build a stable of clients who love you so much they wouldn't think of leaving you. And you do that by consistently showing up.
Right, and that goes to the quality of your work as well as to the accessibility that you provide. But nowadays, with social media being where people tend to it's the best place that you can allow for people to get to know you.
That's right.
And they see your personality, and they find that you're a pleasant person to work with, but you're also reliable, and you're also the content that you provide is solid.
Well, a lot of it is, I'm going to refer to LinkedIn for this because that's where I see it being done best. On LinkedIn, there are some people, and these are largely salespeople who I've connected with over the last couple of years. They started a practice of showing up every single day with a short essay. And by short essay, I mean it might be 25 words, it might be 300 words. I don't know what the limit is. But they were showing up every single day, just sharing something of value, something, of who they were. And they would come in a year later and share a post. I just committed to doing this, and it's amazing the difference it's made. Just showing up. My voice I've got a tickle in my throat. And by the way, what I just did there was a flaw. It was an imperfection. And my husband, Jonathan, who runs my sound, is actually a musician and a trained sound guy. I mean, he knows this stuff cold, and he keeps trying to make things perfect for me. And I so appreciate that, but I keep telling him, no, I want people to understand that we are all flawed. And so I kind of I don't over edit my recordings. I don't let him clean up too much behind me. And so, because this is my workspace, this is how I work, this is how I come.
We decided to do live
Yes.
podcasts so that it is a little more real, and if something happens. Now, unfortunately, we don't have little children or pets stealing the show.
Yes.
Our children are grown, so they're not wandering into the camera feed.
Right now, it's like, come get into the camera feed with me.
Although I did pop up behind you on a conference call the other day.
Yes, you did. That got a laugh.
That was rather hilarious.
Right, but see, here's the thing: we are human. We cough in a recording, and it's okay to be human. So all of that feeds into our topic today. You cannot be invisible. You cannot be good at being invisible. You have got to show up. So what are you doing now to show up and grow your business? If nothing else, join me in the hub at Solopreneur Life. It is designed to fast-track your journey to 6 figures and beyond. So go to solopreneurlife.com/join hub. And check us out. Let me know if you have any questions, because I want you in there where you can actually begin growing your business. Don't forget to subscribe to the Solopreneur Life Podcast and join us next week for another smart episode. Until then, stay awesome.